Welcome to the fifth episode of your legal guide by Emirates advocates and legal consultants. Today, we are glad discussing an important topic, rental matters in the Emirate of Sharjah, to help you understand your rights and responsibilities. As we know, many people live in rental properties or they rent their apartments for investment purposes, and rental issues are quite common, making it essential to understand how to deal and resolve these challenges effectively. We've compiled a list of the most frequently asked questions about rental matters, specifically in Sharjah. Before we start, I would like to clarify that the responses mentioned were provided by our firm's real estate and property department in accordance with the law number 5 of 2024 on property leasing in the Emirate of Sharjah as issued by His Highness Sheikh Dr. Sultan bin Mohammed Al Qasimi, ruler of Sharjah and Supreme Council member. I'm really excited to answer these questions received. And here we have one of the most common questions people ask. Who is responsible for paying for the property leasing contract fees? The landlord or the tenant? In that sense, actually, the landlord is responsible to pay the fees within 15 days starting from the date of the contract drafting. I started only with these small questions. I have another one also. Talking about the certification of lease contracts, who has to certify or renew and pay for the leasing contracts? The contract has to be certified by the municipality or the authorized entities. Otherwise, an administrative fine will be imposed on the landlord as determined by the executive regulations of this law, in addition to the applicable certification fees. The third question we received is as the following. What are the standard obligations of a landlord according to the law number 5, 2024, regulating the property leasing in Sharjah? Actually, answering this question, as the law stated, has 6 points to be considered as the landlord obligations. The first one is delivering the leased property and its appurtenances to the tenant in a condition suitable for the intended use, without any hindrance to its enjoyment throughout the lease term as agreed upon. And the second point is carrying out necessary maintenance on the leased property unless otherwise agreed by the parties to the lease contract. Number 3, not making changes to the leased property that would prevent or diminish its enjoyment without written permissions from the tenant. And the point number 4, granting the tenant the necessary approvals to present to the relevant authorities in the Emirates if they wish to carry out interior design work in the leased property that aligns with its designated purpose, or any other work that requires such approvals, provided that these work do not affect the structural integrity of the leased property or the building in which it is located. And the point number 5, not interfering personally or through others with the tenant in a manner intended to disturb them or pressure them to vacate the leased property, or depriving them of full enjoyment of its appurtenances, or cutting off or disconnecting services to it or to the property in which it is located. And the final point, number 6, returning any financial guarantees previously provided by the tenant upon the termination of the rental relationship, unless they have been wholly or partially deducted for damages caused by the tenant to the leased property that do not fall under normal use. As we talked about the obligations of a landlord, now we have a question mentioning the obligations of a tenant under this law number 5, 2024, which is regulating the property leasing in the Emirate of Sharjah. So as a tenant, let's see the obligations as stated in the law. Number 1, paying the rent on the due dates or as agreed upon in writing. And the second point, using the leased property as agreed in the lease contract. And the third point is not making any changes or modifications to the leased property without obtaining written permission from the landlord and the necessary licenses from the relevant authorities. Number 4, leaving any plannings, constructions, or improvements made to the leased property after the lease term ends, which would cause damage if removed, unless otherwise agreed by the parties to the lease contract. The point number 5, maintaining the leased property and conducting regular maintenance unless otherwise agreed by the parties to the lease contract and allowing the landlord to carry out necessary maintenance as required. And the final point, which should be also considered as a very important one, paying for the consumption of services and any damages caused to the leased property as well as any other fees legally required to be paid from the date of receiving the leased property until the date of handing back to the landlord. In no case may the landlord be charged any fees or expenses of any kind or to any party that the tenant is obligated to pay unless otherwise agreed by the parties to the lease contract. I can see that we are left with only 2 questions, and here is the first one of them. Tenant-landlord disputes are very common, so what steps should be taken to avoid such issues as a tenant and as a landlord? Basically, both the tenant and the landlord should be committed to their obligations we just mentioned. This would be very helpful to avoid any disputes might arise. They are very clear and also fair for both parties. And the last questions we have for today is as the following. With the ever-changing market, it is important to know about the rent adjustments. Are there any specific regulations regarding rent increases? According to the law, the lessor may not increase the agreed upon rent before the expiry of 3 years from the date of the start of the rental relationship, unless the parties to the rental contract agree otherwise. If the lessee accepts increase in the rent before the expiry of the 3 years, the lessor may not increase it again until 2 years have passed from the date of the increase. The increase in the rent after the expiry of the periods referred to in clause number 1 of this article shall be at the value of the fair rent. The executive regulations of this law shall be specify the controls for the fair rent and how to calculate it. The council may, by a decision, amend the periods specified in clause number 1 of this article. I hope answering these questions will be helpful to those looking to move to the Emirate of Sharjah as well as to those who are currently facing similar rental challenges. Understanding your rights and responsibilities as a tenant or a landlord can make a significant difference in your rental experience. If you have more questions or need further clarification, do not hesitate to seek legal advice. Remember, staying informed is your best tool for navigating the rental landscape. Until next time, take care and happy renting. Dear listeners, if you have any legal topics you would like us to discuss, feel free to comment below and we'll cover them in our future episodes. If you need personalized advice on your case, do not hesitate to contact us, and our contact details are mentioned in the description. Thank you for listening, and we'll meet you in the next episode.